the consistency provides a baseline, just like habits, right? You have habits so that you can improvise. Now, that sounds contradictory, to be extremely habitual and disciplined so that you can improvise, but it's precisely the consistency, that bedrock of consistency in habits, that allows you the freedom to improvise effectively.
What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. This podcast is sponsored by Berman Falk Hospitality Group, a design-driven furniture manufacturer who specializes in custom case goods and seating for hotel guest rooms. Today's guest is a visionary founder and recognized restaurateur who successfully brought Spanish-inspired dining to America. He's a 2019 nominee for James Beard Foundation's Award for Outstanding Restaurant Design. He redefined the genre of tapas in New York, DC, Chicago, Boston, Atlanta, and now Nashville. He's the co-author of Boqueria, a cookbook from Barcelona to New York. He's the owner of Cutting Edge Management and founder of Boqueria Restaurants. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Yann de Rochefort. Welcome, Yann.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So I just want to let all the listeners know, Yann and I have known each other for multo years, or
Double digit.
Muy mucho, very many. We were in a business group together. I've seen him grow and build some amazing teams and expand into all these other markets and get into hotels, like put his Boqueria into a hotel in outside of Central Times Square. What hotel is that? AC? Was it AC?
It's the AC Hotel.
And I think that's the first AC hotel
in New York. First AC in New York. I don't know if it was the first in the United States. It was one of the first in the United States. And it is right across the street from New York Times building.
Yes. Isn't there a Schnippers place near there too? Schnippers?
Yes, there is. A block away.
Schnippers. What a weird name. But it's a really cool area, very busy. I actually had a holiday party there for my team before COVID, and it was awesome. And so I'm speaking from a lot of experience. So Yann and I, like I said, we've known each other for a very long time. We lived in the same neighborhood. What's interesting, for some reason, as a restaurateur, you're probably having more hospitality-like transactions per day, per month, per week than most other purveyors of hospitality or innkeepers or hoteliers. And having known you for so long, I never thought of having you on until I was sitting in a Boqueria restaurant in DC with Dave Trost, who is an architect for many of your projects. And he's like, dude, we started talking about it. He's like, dude, why don't you have Yann on? And then I was like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot.
Sometimes the obvious is just staring you in the face.
I would say for me, and maybe I don't want to speak for everyone, but for me, that's often the case more than it's not. So, and sometimes my kids call me Captain Obvious, but I oftentimes miss the obvious because it's like right in front of me. I don't know if I have like late onset autism because my mom took Tylenol when I was a kid or something.
Maybe a little bit of ADHD.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, can't focus on what's in front of you.
I know. Well, thank you for the gentle reminder, Yann.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. So I have a lot of questions for you about as far as how you've expanded, how you've plugged into hospitality venues or a venue like at the AC, how that might fit into your plan in the future. But before we get into all of that good stuff and the experiences that you've created, what does hospitality mean to you? Like what drew you into this world to begin with?
I think the two words that summarize hospitality to me is human connection. And what I mean by that is that hospitality is not the opposite, but what distinguishes hospitality from a transaction, right, is the human connection. It's a dance, right? It takes two to tango. Hospitality is not taking something out of a box and delivering it to someone without having seen them, heard them, thought about what their needs are and customize what you're doing to their needs. So whether it's the product, whether it is the interaction, whether it is, sort of like the energy that you bring to it, right? It's hospitality. It starts with being attuned to the other person.
So, okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here because I've been to many of your locations. I think 2 in New York, 1 in Chicago, 1 in DC. I haven't been to the one in DC. That's where Dave and I and Ethan Gabany, also a former podcast guest. It was like really cool. It was like a last minute, hey, I'm driving to the Hyatt across the street. You guys want to have dinner? And it was so weird. Like, we'll be there in 20 minutes. And it's just one of those magical things. That was my first time eating in your DC location. So that was probably the 4th place. Here's the limb. Many, many years ago, I was shocked to read an article in Bon Appetit Magazine where they said Houston's or Hillstone's or both, I forget how they put it, because I think it's the same. It's the best restaurant in America. And I'm like, what are they talking about? This is Bon Appetit. Like, what are they doing? That's like saying PBR is the best beer or something like that, right? But I don't want to denigrate anything with Houston's because I've been there and I love it. It's really good. But I was very surprised because I thought they would take a more highbrow approach. Like if you think about that Matrix from New York Magazine. But what they said about it is that no matter what Houston's you're in, you have the same kind of experience, and they pride themselves on their management training program. And for anyone looking to get into hospitality too, apparently that's a good track to learn so many things about how to deliver.
They are extremely rigorous.
They are, but
yes,
and I assume you are too. Maybe not to the scale that they are. I don't know, but you. Here's my point. Having been to many, many of your locations, I got the same experience and feel and level and quality of food and attention at all of them equally. And every time I go, I have an incredible experience. And that's not by just in the same way that we were talking about Houston's. I don't want to talk about Houston's. I want to talk about you. That's not magic, right? That's a lot of effort and a lot of playbooks and a lot of training and caring. And like, how do you do that?
So I want to build on that, right? Because there's an apparent contradiction between what I said, which was hospitality is customized, it's individualized, it's taking care of someone where they are in that moment, right? And your point about consistency, right? And those two might seem like they're in opposition, but they're actually not. And here's how they're not. The consistency is a consistency of product, right? And I think that anybody who comes to Boqueria and gets the gambas al ajillo, patatas bravas, or the pincho moruno, or any of the other innumerable sort of Spanish classic tapas that we serve, has the right to expect the same quality of product and a consistent quality of product, right? So their consistency absolutely matters. But what is different is that they may be coming in for a date, or they may be coming in for a business dinner. They may be coming in a rush because they have a show to catch. And so the way that we deliver the experience, the way that we engage with them has to be different because it has to match that moment. And so the consistency provides a baseline, just like habits, right? You have habits so that you can improvise. Now, that sounds contradictory, to be extremely habitual and disciplined so that you can improvise, but it's precisely the consistency, that bedrock of consistency and habits, that allows you the freedom to improvise effectively.
That resonates with me so incredibly well because I find I'm a lifelong practitioner of GTD, getting things done, which is like a personal workflow process where I capture everything, I act on it, I clarify it. There's times when I fall off the GTD horse and it's very easy to get back on. But what I found through this structure and regimen is it allows me to be my most creative when I have that structure. And it does sound counterintuitive. How do you recruit the people and train the people to exist within this framework, but also how do you let them know that it's okay to be you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have look, we've been at this for 20 years now, and we've been at this through some very, very stormy seas. And we have, I think, always been focused on trying to create the consistency through habits and systems that allows people to then be themselves. And again, it sounds contradictory, but there is a process of acculturation to Boqueria when you come in, where you learn. one of the one of the best compliments that a server paid me once was that we have very structured training programs, and we have a lot of structure internally. But the server who had worked, I think, in sales at Macy's and had been a Boqueria guest for years before coming to work with us, said, I always loved Boqueria, but I didn't realize how corporate you were. And I was taken aback, and I was like, oh, what do you mean? That didn't sound good. She goes, no, 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 it's good, because I never realized how much structure was below the surface. Until I came in, I would never have imagined that you had these training programs, that you had, an online database of all your recipes, that you had, that as a server, I would have to go through 2 weeks of training and get tested every day. And the guest is not supposed to see that, but it's having that structure that allows the guest to then have the experience that she had, which was like, this is just a cool neighborhood restaurant, and it's really consistent.
That's really surprising. I'm trying to think of my experiences being there where I guess it's hard for me I'm trying to separate myself from knowing you and seeing like how hard you've worked at like building the mousetrap or and get that to be corporate, because without corporate, I don't even like the corporate word is.
I didn't like the word corporate either. I hate the word corporate. I never want it used. But once I understood what she said, I was like, that's actually great.
I'm going to go with structured, right? Okay. But even with structure, when I walk in, I get that same experience, right? It's you mentioned the food, you mentioned the service, but then I also, even though you're in all these different locations and they're very different cities and locations within the cities, the design is different, but there's a warmth that is consistent throughout all of them. And even though the design is different, I don't know if it's probably the lighting, maybe a palette, but I haven't been to all of them, but there's a feeling of warmth I get into. And it's also, you kind of walk into them and there's almost like you kind of got to find your way to where you want to go, right? There's like almost like a labyrinth feel in the ones that I've been to anyway, but I feel warm when I go in there. How do you bring that level of from the built environment to, I don't know, be the ribbon that ties it all together?
So I think that there's a DNA, right? There's a common DNA. So the restaurants are not identical twins. To me, once you start having perfectly identical restaurant, it's a big signal that the founder has left the building. And I say that as a founder, but I say that because it's a signal that like the individual vision has left, and the people perpetuating it are just replicating the thing without fundamentally understanding the why of the design. And I've worked with several different designers. We just worked with Alexa Nafisi from Adian Design on our Atlanta location. She did an amazing job. But I'm always highly involved in the design, and I collaborate with architects. And we've been privileged to work with amazing architects over the years. You mentioned David Trax. We worked with Meyer Davis on the first 2 or 3 restaurants. I've worked with several amazing architects and designers, but I'm always very involved, and I try to convey the framework, the essential elements that make a Boqueria, but then let them interpret it in a way that brings some individuality to each one of them. So, my design reference, I think to me, the paragon of design in that sense of having a common DNA, but then individual locations that feel different and that are worth visiting in their own right, is Aesop. Those stores are absolutely amazing, right? And so you walk in, they could have completely different materials. You know, you have the common element of the packaging, but they could have completely different materials, different architecture, different look and feel. And yet, you know, even if they took the product off the shelf, you would know where you are. So that's sort of my North Star. I'd like to do that for hospitality for Boqueria.
But I would also say that the warmth, I don't know, it's very rare I feel a warmth when I walk into a retail, but I haven't been in an ASOP in a long time, but I feel like in there the warmth maybe is from the scent, right? I feel like there's this like when every Boqueria is like, I feel like I'm in a
You're hugged. Yeah, you're
yes,
hugged. Yes.
yes.
So I think there's several elements that make that happen, and they're part of our design guidelines. They are one, the high seating. Right? The fact that most of the seating is high increases the level of energy. It ups the level of energy because it blends the dining room and the bar into one contiguous space, as opposed to having a bar as a waiting area and the dining room. The high seating is one factor. You have banquettes that are facing inward, so the space is encircled with banquettes facing inward. You have communal tables that often anchor the communal tables at the keystone of our dining rooms. And then lighting, warm lighting at different angles, music, and the materials. One of our guidelines is that we should not use any material that was not available in, I think, 1945. Why 1945? Because that was sort of like the industrial age. We would not use corian. We don't use plastic. We use metal and wood and tile and marble. So we use materials that instinctively feel comfortable because they've been around for so long and they've been used in so much classic and historical architecture. So those are all elements that help to generate the warmth that you're talking about, and that's very intentional.
Okay, the big unlock for me there, the lighting is definitely key, but I didn't realize the high seating. Like that's super unusual to have that go throughout a restaurant everywhere.
It's very unusual, and it does several things. So it brings the dining room and the bar into one contiguous space. I think it increases the level of energy. For some reason, there's just a naturally higher level of energy when everybody's sort of at counter height. It also changes the physical dynamic of the interaction with the server.
Yeah, because they're shorter.
You're literally eye to eye.
Yeah, totally.
You're literally eye to eye. You're not looking up. They're not looking down. It's not this awkward thing where you're different heights. You're literally eye to eye. And so I was talking about human connection. That's one of the ways in which the physical space, the design intentionally fosters human connection by putting you eye to eye.
Um, I'm trying to go through. Obviously we've all eaten in thousands of restaurants over our lives, but I cannot think. I'm like going through this photo Rolodex of my brain. I can't think of another restaurant that has all high seating. Is that possible? Or where did you get your inspiration from?
It's rare. Well, I got the inspiration from when we were designing the first Boqueria, Will Meyer and Gray Davis and I.
And I also didn't realize that Will and Gray designed your first one, and that's a big surprise because I love them and they're great. Hi, Will. Hi, Gray.
Yeah, I managed to get them to design this tiny little tapas bar on a side street in Manhattan when they were just starting out, really. I think they'd probably been in business for a couple of years. These days, I don't think that the totality of my construction budget then would probably not rise to the level of their fees today. But I was lucky enough to catch them on the rise, as it were. And we, not only that, but they actually agreed to go to Barcelona with me for 48 hours. And we spent 48 hours walking up and down the streets of Barcelona, poking our head into all these different tapas bars. And what we were after was distilling the essence of those types of institutions to their essence. We said, okay, how do we take the things that are essential to tapas bars, the things that tell you intuitively you're in a tapas bar, and then maintain those elements, but then recreate it in a way that would be unique. And so where we landed was high seating, because in tapas bar, generally you're eating standing up, right? You're at tall tables, you're eating standing up at the bar, you're interacting a lot with the bartender. So it's high seatings, it's the menus, it's the visibility of product on shelves. It's the lighting, it's the visibility of food. So when you walk into a Boqueria, generally you have a tapas station. In Spain, they'll have often have food that's already prepared and waiting for you to order. In the US, you can't do that because health department says don't do that ever. But also because the guest doesn't want it, right? The guest wants to order off a menu and have it made for them. And so we took all of those elements and we said, okay, those are the elements that if we can recreate them in a way that is unique, will respect tradition and tell people intuitively they're in a tapas bar, but we can recreate them in a way that will be uniquely Boqueria. And that's what we did, I think, very successfully, certainly with the first one, and we've carried that through since.
Yeah, and I'm still, as you're saying this, I'm even visualizing time in Barcelona, and I get the bar height stuff, but there's still low chairs and tables off to the side done kind of chaotically. But
But they're not distinctive. So they might be there, but they're not distinctive.
yeah,
And so the things we tried to look at the things that were distinctive, that marked a difference between house bar and something else. And so, yes, you also have, you have lots of other things that might be there, but they're not what tell you you're in the tapas bar.
okay. So now I want to go into your idea and going back into the structure part of things. So you're very goal oriented. I knew you when you were really starting to scale and try out a couple different restaurant concepts, right? I think you went somewhere, you tried one thing out, and then you're like, whoa, let's just stick with tapas, even though you love all food. But then it was also building a leadership team and having a plan and how do you grow. And then freaking COVID happens, right? And then you're like, shit, I have a restaurant, it's COVID, and you got punched in the face. But you're even before that, you plugged into one of the first AC hotels in the country, I think the first in New York. How has that idea of structure, plan, and goal driven you to kind of get to where you are? And I also like investing in that stuff is really hard, especially when you get punched in the face. So like walk us through what your growth plans were and then how you adjust.
So, I mean, you start with one and then you build another. And generally, like most restaurateurs, you're financing each one as you go and you're looking for friends and family, et cetera. And that's how we financed most of the early restaurants. And then in 2017, we restructured the whole company and we got the vast majority of our investors on board behind the growth plan. We said, look, we're not going to dividend out anymore. We're going to reinvest the cash that we generate into growth, and we want to turn this ultimately into a regional, if not a national brand. So we started doing that, and 2020 happened, and as you say, I think you're referencing my favorite quote from which is from Mike Tyson, which is that everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah, especially by Mike Tyson. And COVID
Yeah.
could have been the equivalent of Mike Tyson.
I think, he was. It definitely was. It definitely was. It hurt, and all of a sudden you need to reassess. And I think that in the early days, I was very focused on building up my team and having the right people around me. And I think that the people absolutely matter. But what I've realized over time is that the people will change. Right? There are very few companies that can scale and have the same people in the same positions all grow into their job at a company that becomes 2x, 4x, 5x, 10x the size, right? Very often, some people will follow, some people will not. And so, although people are obviously absolutely critical, I think that the history of the past, 5 to 10 years has really reinforced my belief in culture. And I wouldn't say culture over people, but culture for people. And what I mean by that is that the people may change, but when you bring new people in, I think nothing guaranteed. I was going to say guaranteed. Nothing guarantees anything. There are definitely no guarantees. But I think what helps to maintain your trajectory and also allow you to pivot is having a really strong culture. And culture is a word that is thrown around a lot. And so I'll define what I mean by when I say culture, I'll define what I mean by it or what I think about when I say that. I think that three of the things that I believe help define culture are beliefs, rituals, and values. Right? Beliefs, rituals, and values are markers and carriers of culture. And so if you have a culture that is intentional, where it's underpinned by certain values, right? So we have a number of values, from taking it up a notch to owning it, doing the right thing, et cetera. And then we define what those mean. So those are values. This is what we think matters, and this is what we hold ourselves accountable for in terms of our behavior. You then have certain beliefs, and you have rituals. And rituals are really, really important because they help to carry the belief and to carry the behaviors that you want. And so when somebody new comes in, if you have to replace somebody or somebody new comes in, like that server that I referenced earlier, they start to look around and they go, okay, there's a way that things are done here, right? And that builds a level of resilience that I think is unlike anything else, because you can have people come in and out. This is a high turnover industry, and as a high turnover industry, structurally, there's only so much that you can do about it. You can have higher or lower turnover, but you're always going to have turnover in the restaurant industry, and it's higher than in most. But if you have a really strong culture where the values are explicit and people actually buy into them, right? So core values that are a poster on the wall, but that nobody buys into, are incredibly corrosive. But core values that are on a card, like the Ritz Carlton or Boqueria, not that I'm putting us on the same level as Ritz Carlton, I can only hope to do that. But core values where people look at them and go, yeah, that's true. They actually walk the walk, right?
I would put you, and actually any company, at the same level as Ritz Carlton for the idea of having that card or the poster. But having a card or a poster is not what does it. It's really, it's how do you take those values, which are so hard to figure out, and it often takes a lot of different iterations. But when you get them right, and then you talk about them and they become part of your lexicon or the ritual, or actually it's more of really a belief, because people believe in it. If you're giving feedback
It's
and
all of those things. It's part of the lexicon, and we named ours. We use those words deliberately. I wanted the headline of the core value to be something that would roll off the tongue, that wouldn't feel stilted. So people talk about taking up a notch, unironically, when they say, "Okay, I'm doing something better. I'm training to get better at what I'm doing," or we're taking it up a notch by, like, we're about to change our croquetas, for instance. We've been at this for 20 years now. We're about to celebrate our 20-year anniversary. We've been selling croquetas since day one. We're still taking it up a notch. I was still like, you know what? I don't love these. I want to love these. I feel like we can make them even better. And we do. So when those things are true and they're lived and leadership actually embodies them, and people look at leadership and go, okay, they're not full of it. They're actually living those values. That instills, I think, a passionate adherence to the company. And then you want to reinforce with rituals. Rituals are incredibly important. And you have rituals whether you like it or not. You just, and you have values whether you like it or not. You just want to be intentional about them if you want to win.
so I'm going to go back to me missing the obvious that's right in front of me. And we both, I think, were coming up with our values and refining them separately about the same time. I think we maybe even had the same coach. Is that possible?
Phyllis,
Phyllis, or was it?
well, we had
Was Mark?
Mark Green.
And Phyllis also helped tie it all together. I actually was just thinking about Phyllis yesterday. I drove through Chappaqua. This is really weird. Okay, so the world started to talk.
We had Phyllis led a full day seminar where we came up with the core values, and then we, refined them and wordsmith it over time. But yeah, we came up with them with this awesome exercise called, Boqueria on Mars. And the exercise was, okay, the premise was, you want your values to be founded in something that's already true. You want to amplify something that's true. You can't just pluck something out of thin air and say, okay, we want to be all about excellence when we're not, or whatever. So the exercise was Boqueria on Mars, and it was the thought was, you're about to launch people to Mars, to put a Boqueria there. Who do you send and why them?
Yes.
And it was this awesome exercise. And everybody, and we went through that and we're like, okay, this person, this person, this person. And they were general managers and there were some dishwashers and there were servers, et cetera. And he's like, those are the people. And then why? What values, what behaviors do those people demonstrate that make you want to pick them? Right. And that got at some pretty important truths. So I got it like, okay, those are the behaviors that we actually value. And why do we value them? And then we started mining that. That was an awesome exercise. I still remember that.
Oh my God, I'm going to do this. I need to do this again. But going back to the Captain Obvious or missing Captain Obvious for me, if I go back to how it just feels, and I say this about businesses, I can walk into a business and it just feels different. And I often say it feels different because they're living their values. Their values are clearly defined. They're living or breathing. They're talking them. Restaurants, it's really hit or miss. But I think outside of the lighting, the food, the experience, the serving, the interaction, it's the value. Like that's what it is. It's the values that tie them all together. 100%. All those other things do, but all those other things come from those values. And we were on a journey figuring that shit out together way back in the day. Oh my God, this is crazy.
Look at that. Some of that hard work actually paid off.
Wow. And then you forget about it, right? Because you just go on these other paths. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for helping me have that light bulb moment. Self-discovery never ends. Okay. So I think it was 2018. And actually just yesterday, I was dropping off a bottle of wine at a colleague of mine at Berman Falk. She used to work with me at Beechwood, and her husband was home when I was dropping it off. And then we were all hanging out around the counter, and he's like, I think the last time I saw you was at your holiday party, and it must have been 2018. I think it was 2018. It could have been 2019. So at Boqueria. So actually, it's so weird. We're talking about Phyllis, this whole thing. I'm talking to you. And like this is the universe sometimes screams things, and I don't know what it's saying right now. But that experience for you opening up in your first hotel, that was a new hotel. So you can't really say there's not like a before and after or A/B test about how the Boqueria was accretive to the hotel. It's always just been existing that way. But as you were saying earlier, when you were describing Boqueria, or walking through Barcelona with Will and Gray and trying to see how communal and the feeling of tapas and trying to find those universal truths of tapas. But I like how I think you said it's like a super engaging, communal and casual environment. I'm probably putting words into your mouth, but it would seem to me, and that upped energy from the high seating, et cetera, and all the things. So many hotels struggle with activating their lobby. Now, not every hotel wants a Spanish tapas experience, but how do you envision, like if I were a developer in a market that was interesting or that might appreciate tapas or that experience, like how could you plug into that? And how in your vision or from data that you might have, like how is that accretive to that model of the hotel by plugging you into the lobby?
I mean, I think that tapas works really well in hotels, in part because the experience is so versatile. All right. So we're open from the very beginning. We've been open all day. We don't close. When we open at 11 or 11:30 in the morning generally, and we close sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight. We're open all day long.
Hey, everybody. We've been doing this podcast for over 3 years now. And one of the themes that consistently comes up is sustainability. And I'm just really proud to announce that our sponsor, Berman Falk Hospitality Group, is the first within our hospitality industry to switch to sustainable and recyclable packaging, eliminating the use of styrofoam. Please check out their impact page in the show notes for more info.
I want to ask a question there because I'm not a restaurateur. I know a lot of people who have restaurants, but one of the challenges is always, how do you switch from
shift change?
Yeah, from lunch to dinner and lighting and all. So how does tapas work for that challenge?
So most of our menu is the same all day long. most of our menu is the same all day long. And yeah, there's about a half hour. We figured it out over time, but there's about a half hour period during which the menu is a little bit more limited, but we still don't close. Right. So the bar is open and we even during that half hour, generally between 5:30 to 6, depending on the market, where the menu might be a little bit more limited. But we figured it out over time, and we want somebody to be able to drop in anytime, and whether they want, a couple bites and a beer or whether they want a full meal, they can have that any time of day between, when we open and when we close. And so the fact that it can be open all day, that we are busy all day. Sometimes I walk in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, where did everybody come from? Why are we full? It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because it is that versatile. And I think that is very accretive to a hotel environment where people are not necessarily on a set schedule. They might be checking in, checking out at different times, and that I think works very well for a hotel environment.
And then, are you talking to many hotel folks about plugging this in, or do you
I
get
am.
resistance? Okay, so like if you're talking to them, if I owned a hotel and I was trying to reinvigorate the lobby, and I was like, oh, tapas could be cool in this market. Like, what's it like? How do you walk them through to see if it's a good decision or a bad decision? I'm sure you probably walk away from more sites than you want to work in.
I mean, there's a fit. So we have a clientele that's pretty varied. But if you walk into a Boqueria, you'll have people in their early 20s and people in their, late 60s or more, depending on the market, depending on the time. So we have pretty varied clientele, but there's a certain price point or certain socioeconomic target. So, that would be the first thing is the price point sort of compatible? Is the energy compatible? Is the vibe compatible? Is it, I would not put a Boqueria in a Ritz Carlton, for instance. I also would not put it in the Hampton Inn. All right. So there's a certain strike zone. Could it go in a Moxy, possibly AC Hotel? Definitely. W, I think in W we could do it. I'm actually working on the idea of a Boqueria Beach Club, which I think would be great in W or other beach hotels. So does the psychographic fit with the hotel? Does the demographic fit with the hotel? The price point fit with the hotel? Does the vibe fit? All of those things would be important because we're not going to put it just anywhere. I think it has to be accretive to the hotel and it has to be accretive to the brand.
And then again, this is me just being a complete dummy on this, but if I own a hotel and I have a lobby or public space and a Boqueria could fit there, obviously everything has constraints and budgets, but you really invest in the space. Is that, if I own that hotel, I'm like, okay, Yann, like lease this from us, or is it like a JV, or is it like a shared, how does it work? Like,
yeah, we've considered both. We can lease a space. We can do a management deal. Daisy Hotel, we also manage the rooftop bar. It's a totally separate brand. It's not a Boqueria brand, and we manage it for them. So we can also, we can run F&B in a hotel property where we might have a Boqueria, but also run a separate F&B outlet for the property owner. So both of those things are true. I think that for Boqueria, what would be important to me is generally to have a separate entrance and to actually be separate from the lobby. So there's an entrance to Boqueria Daisy Hotel from the lobby. Generally speaking, though, I think that you were talking earlier about our design and our feel, et cetera. And I think that there was one location we did which did not work out. And I think it was because we compromised because it was part of a shared space. And so I would want the Boqueria to have an entrance from the lobby, but primarily to be its own space and to have an entrance from the street. Because if we compromise, it is a 360 experience. It is experiential dining. There are a lot of elements that are very intentional about Boqueria, and I think when we compromise those, we run a risk.
did you walk, I didn't know about you managing the rooftop bar at the AC at Times Square. Did you walk into that deal knowing that would happen, or did that happen after you'd
No,
opened?
that was part of the deal from day one.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Huh. But there could be another hotel owner somewhere that maybe has space that's not optimized and they want to do a restaurant and you were like, okay, yeah, I come in and I'll do that other thing for you. So there's no like set playbook on how to do it.
No, there really isn't.
Huh. Refresh my memory. I think you tried some other food experience. It may have been Spanish or not. I don't remember. But then you're like, you tried it and you're like, you know what? I got to stick to Boqueria and tapas. Like, how did you know? I understand every entrepreneur's desire to chase a shiny object or to try new things, but how did that experience change your thinking on just staying focused or reinforce your gut instinct to stay focused?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that there was one project in particular, which was called Manzanilla, which was on 27th. It was Spanish also, it was on 27th Street. It was a different project. And honestly, that was one of those projects in which everything that could go wrong did go wrong in spades. From, hitting, I can't remember. I think we hit a power line when we were drilling through the slab to open up a staircase. We drilled through a power line that was not marked on the plan. That was fun, and expensive. There was a hurricane which interrupted construction for a while and then pushed Con Ed back by several months because they were so overwhelmed dealing with more pressing things than the new gas connection to a restaurant in Manhattan. So I think that there were a lot of very idiosyncratic aspects of that specific project that that contributed. Luck has a lot to do with business. Luck does have a lot to do with business, as you know.
Yeah, but that also just it helped you focus and then like really lean into Boqueria and you're able to impact and delight so many more people because you're not distracted. Um, for the Boquerias that exist in all the cities I mentioned before, you're leasing. It's like a ground. Is it a ground lease?
Well, it's a lease. We generally have 10, 15, 20-year deals on spaces.
And is it just like you have a real estate broker and they go around and look at it? Are you getting to know the landlords? Like, how do you select like what the final thing is?
All of the above. We don't always get it right. I mean, I think sometimes, there have been one or two locations where we didn't get it right in retrospect. And there have been one or two locations where, we got lucky and it was even better than we thought it would be. But we look at a range of things. We look at, first of all, is the bones of the building right for us? Is our crowd already in the area, dining in the area? Are there other restaurant concepts at similar price point doing strong volumes? You can do all the demographic research you want, but at the end of the day, if you see that there are other concepts that are doing strong volumes in a similar price point, that is a very strong indication of the potential of the market. You do look at competition and how much competition there is, and whether you bring something that is new and ideally desired to that submarket.
I love the word psychographic because that's like EO speak, right? Of gazelles or rock habits and all that good stuff. But when you think about the I guess the reason why I asked the last question on the landlord type and mix and how you find the places, I would assume that for a location for a restaurant, okay, yes, you can take in all those intangibles of what the landlord might be like, but I would think it leans more towards transactional. This is available, it makes sense, do it or not. You might not get into the landlord relationship. On the hotel side, I think the owner would be way more involved in it. So like if you were to paint a psychographic for the type of hotel owner or even brand, like if you went into every Hyatt, for instance, or I don't know, some sub brand within Hyatt or Marriott, or like, how do you identify the psychographic of the owner of that hotel or developer of that hotel? And then if you were to do something separately, like how do you align with a brand if you were to figure out something on scale?
I think there's an analog to how we bond with people, right? I think that shared interests, shared passion, shared taste are a big part of it. All right. We tend to gravitate to people, like you get to know people over what might seem to be superficial things like shared interests more than fundamental values. It's only once you get to know each other and you get to really understand the other person that you get to, who they are as a person, values, etc. So I think the first step is, okay, do we have similar tastes, similar inclinations, similar ways of doing business? And I think that's really important. And then, yeah, you want there to be a fundamental alignment. But one thing I would say that is not a cautionary tale, but I think that mitigates the criticality of that relationship is those relationships can change. Buildings change hands, right? I've been in buildings that have changed hands multiple times. And so you might get into a relationship and I would be leery of signing a space where the landlord consideration is too strong, because that landlord relationship could change in a year and you could be facing somebody entirely different. So I think it's a good thing to keep in mind, is that can change. The thing that is never going to change is the location. You're not going to take a building and move it somewhere else.
Okay, to take that one step further, one of my favorite books, I'm sure you loved it too, but is Setting the Table with Danny Meyer. And when he was selecting Union Square Cafe or Gramercy, I don't remember which one, he was being offered in like a marginal neighborhood or an up and coming neighborhood, I think it was a 15 or a 20-year lease. And he was so terrified of doing that. But I think in the book, he talked to his uncle, and his uncle like, okay, a lease is a liability, but you really have to look at it as an asset. Like, you're going to have 15 or 20 years of runway to make this thing work. And that's a huge mind shift. Did you go through a similar mind shift and when thinking about these super duper long-term leases?
Well, I think it depends on the terms of the lease. And there's a range of level of commitments. And I think two of the things that define the level of commitment are, one, the investment that you're putting in, right? So it costs us several $1 million to open a new restaurant. That is one facet of the commitment. But the other one is the lease, and you have different personal guarantees, corporate guarantees, limited guarantees. And, in New York, there's something known as a good guy guarantee, which I haven't actually seen anywhere outside of New York. It's kind of ironic that New York City would be the place where you have these quote unquote good guy guarantees. And a good guy guarantee is a clause that allows you to get out of the lease by paying fixed indemnity of anywhere from like 2, 3 to 6 months, or sometimes more, but rarely more, of rent as long as you're current. So as long as I'm current, I can say, this is not working out for me. Here are the keys, and here is, the next 3 months worth of rent, and I can walk away.
And you walk it out, and you have to like broom sweep the place, right?
Broom sweep the place, like your investment sunk, right? Which is why I mentioned the investment. Like, the investment really matters. But if you look at that type of deal, which is probably the most tenant favorable sort of lease deal or lease guarantee you can have, if you have that sort of deal, the lease is a fixed cost option. I would rather have the option of staying 20 years. So if the cost of exiting is the same, I would want the lease deal to be as long as possible. I'd want it to be 50 years. Because I can always walk away. And you can always walk away from the lease. There are fixed indemnities, you negotiate a way out of it, et cetera. And so you always have an option to walk away from it. And if that option cost is fixed, or if that exit cost is fixed, you want the term to be as long as possible.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. When I was winding down my company in 2019 and pivoting and merging with another company, I had a lease on Broadway between 28th and 29th. And I think I had 6 months left on it from like August to January. And there was a good guy clause. And I basically got all my stuff out there. I talked to the landlord. I was like, hey, I got 6 months left. Like, no one's coming to work. Can I execute the good guy clause or whatever it was? And he's like, no, we can just see you in court. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? So I wound up just paying the last 6 months. And I don't know, maybe I kept some things in there. But it was really annoying. The good guy clause didn't work for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure why.
I think he was just a dick.
That is entirely possible.
Yeah.
That is entirely possible, which actually reminds me of I think the best legal advice I ever got was actually not really legal advice. I was negotiating a lease with a huge landlord, and they were being absolute assholes about it. And I was just, working really hard to try to wrest all these negotiations out of them. But this was a huge landlord. I mean, they would outweigh me in their ability to pay legal fees. I can't remember who they had. I think they had Skadden Arps as their attorney. And so, their legal fees, they were already into more legal fees and lease negotiations than my construction cost was going to be for the restaurant. But in any case, we walked out of one of those meetings, and my attorney turned to me and he said, contracts don't enforce themselves. And what he meant by that was at the end of the day, yeah, the words are going to matter. But if you have to face these guys in courts, the cost of enforcing it and winning in court are going to be such
Totally.
that it will be a Pyrrhic victory. And so contracts don't enforce themselves is a phrase that has really stuck with me.
Totally, because anyone can take anyone to court and make your life miserable. So
yeah, and if you're facing if you're facing a huge landlord,
yeah, that's where that was my decision. I was like, okay, so I got like, I don't know what it was, 50 or 60 grand left. So I'm like, ugh. Okay, I'll just pay it, and I'll come in here and take naps if I need to.
I mean, we all know people who are in the wrong and yet take people to court, and because they have deep pockets, and it's worth it to them.
Oh yeah, I read about some of these people in the news every day.
It vaguely rings a bell.
So you mentioned the croquetas. What's a dish that's been at Boqueria since day one and really tells the story of who Boqueria and who you are?
I think there are two of them. It's 2 for 1. It's a BOGO. So I think there are two. One is the dates wrapped in bacon.
Oh yeah.
So there are 3 ingredients. You really cannot mess it up, right? It is a date stuffed with a Morcona almond and blue cheese, wrapped in bacon and fried.
Yep.
It is delicious. It has been on the menu since day one. And when I remember we had our first friends and family dinner. And this is the first Boqueria, first friends and family dinner. And we're reading the feedback from all the people who came to the dinner. And chef is livid. And I'm like, what's wrong? He goes, I worked on all these dishes, and I have this complicated dish and this other fish dish and this. And the people are raving about these dates wrapped in bacon. And it made him mad. And I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, that's perfect.
Yes.
It is 4 ingredients. We know exactly what they are. We cannot mess it up. And people love it.
And when you're all backed up in the kitchen and people are starving and hungry, you can at least get those out really quick.
Exactly. So I was like, that is a win. But for him, it was like, no, but anybody can make that. I'm like, yeah, but they didn't. And we are.
Totally.
So that's one. And then at kind of the other end of the spectrum is the gambas al ajillo. They're shrimp, which are cooked in olive oil, garlic, and guindilla peppers generally. And the traditional dish is just that. And what we've done is I'm going to use one of our core values here, really taking it up a notch, because we add lobster stock that is reduced and brandy and a little bit of lemon juice. And it takes a very traditional dish and it really transforms it and gives it a lot more complexity, a lot more layers of flavor. People want to take the bread and dip it into the olive oil with the garlic, the guindilla pepper, and the lobster stock, and ask for more bread to have more of it. And it's at the other end of the spectrum because that one is complicated, right? But it takes a very traditional dish and yet turns it a little bit inside out, takes it up a notch, makes it that much more interesting, that much more complex. So it's not exactly what you would have in Spain. In my humble opinion, it's better.
I didn't realize it was the reduced lobster.
Yeah.
Okay, so restaurants are not an easy business. And in certain cities and jurisdictions, they're becoming harder and harder from just like inflation, labor costs, insurance, like you name everything. It's a tough business. But in spite of that, you endure, right? Um, as you look to the future, despite all these headwinds, what's exciting you most?
I think to keep impacting people. I um, I get regenerated from spending time with our people. I get regenerated from spending time with guests. I get regenerated from seeing the impact that we have on people, from seeing, somebody who might have started as a dishwasher grow into a chef de cuisine, and seeing somebody who might have started as a host or a server grow into a manager, and sort of, I don't want to oversell, but in a sense, kind of self-actualize, right? Become a stronger professional and grow and contribute to a culture that I think they've come to love. That's what really excites me. We just did 2 days of training in DC with all of our general managers and chefs, and it was 2 days of really intense training, classroom training, talking about we were talking about structure earlier. That was really about structure. Like, how do we plan food production? How do we forecast? How do we do all these things that are not sexy? It's not why those people got into the restaurant business, but it was the part of that structure that allows them to then be hospitable and to create great food. And they, at the end of 2 days, they were milling around talking about everything they just covered, and excited to implement it, and excited because they said, okay, this is going to make our lives easier. We're getting better at our job, and we're being challenged. And I think that the restaurant industry is very sometimes much maligned by the press, and caricaturized on television. But I think that it is an incredible place for people to grow, for people to be trained, for people to develop careers that might not have the same shot elsewhere. But if you work in a restaurant, certainly the restaurant like Boqueria, I'm not going to make that claim of every restaurant, but I think certainly a restaurant like Boqueria, and there are many others like us, and you're willing to work and grow and learn, you can make a career out of it, and really enhance your life. And I don't think that gets enough play. I really don't.
Like going back to that Houston's thing, just like you with Boqueria, it's not just they're going to learn, you're going to teach, right? You're nurture. And that's also why I don't know as well with the restaurant industry, but on the hospitality side, to me, it's one of the few career paths that the ascent and path to leadership can be so steep. You can start as a housekeeper, you can start as a bell person, and then if you are into it and show up on time, you're engaged, you want to learn, like you're going to be a general manager before you know it.
Absolutely. The opportunities are always there. I mean, always. Again, I don't know every environment, and I don't want to make a blanket statement about every single restaurant in America, but I know it's true for us. I know I'm very passionate about that, and I also know that we are far from the only ones.
The other thing is, and I got to figure out how to talk more about this, but even just going from high school into hospitality, whether it's restaurants or hotels, you can be on a steep career path without being overburdened with college debt and university debt, right?
We've had 20-something general managers whose parents are asking them when they're going to get a real job, meaning that 20-something, meanwhile, that 20-something general manager is running a $5 million business,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
They own the P&L, they own HR, they own every aspect of that business.
Going back to how TV or media portrays restaurants, like I was watching The Bear, and I really enjoyed the first 2 seasons, and then like I couldn't watch it anymore. It stressed me the fuck out. Like I would watch it at night, and then I'd be like so anxious that I couldn't sleep. But it's not like that in real life. Or it can be like that in real life in some places.
There are some aspects, but obviously, it's dramatized for effect.
Yeah. Well, it worked because I lost a couple nights of sleep there. I just didn't sleep while watching it. Yann, this has been awesome. If I were someone that wanted to get in touch with you or learn more about Boqueria, or more importantly, a hotelier or a developer who wants to plug in or look at plugging in a Boqueria into one of their lobbies via a separate entrance.
I answer a separate entrance. A construction budget, please.
Yes, with a construction budget. What's the best way for them to get in touch and learn more?
Yann at BoqueriaNYC.com. YANN at BoqueriaNYC.com. I can't claim to have an inbox 0, but I do answer my emails pretty quickly.
Great.
Especially if you have a space for me.
Awesome. And then I'll put in we'll put in the company website. I'll put a link to your book as well.
Yeah, BoqueriaRestaurant.com, and the book is, I believe, available on Amazon.
Great. And I'll put a link in there so everyone actually before I give the real wrap of everything in that Boqueria cookbook, what's the most approachable recipe to make at home for if you have guests over? Tortilla?
Yeah. Tortilla is a good one. It's not easy.
Oh, see, I like an easy tortilla. You got
Yeah, it's not easy. But tortilla is a good one.
I'm gonna make the tortilla. I know I'm gonna make the tortilla because my uncle was Spanish and he taught me how to make tortilla and paella as a young age.
If all else fails, make sangria.
And then it doesn't matter what you feed them if you serve them enough of that.
Yeah, everybody's happy.
Totally. Yann, seriously, this is long overdue. Thanks to Dave Trost and making this inspiration happen. But it's so good to see you. And thank you for sharing yourself and your time and your story.
Thank you. This was really good fun.
Yeah, it really was. And now I'm going to reach out to Phyllis Dealey because that was a crazy. And it just happened yesterday. I was thinking about her too.
And okay.
Mark Green. I got to reach out to him as well. Oh my God. And thank you to all of our listeners. Without you, we wouldn't be here talking to cool people like Yann and hearing about their experience. And if this has changed your idea about hospitality or restaurants, or if you want to put a Boqueria into your hotel, pass it on. Or you know someone that wants to, pass it on. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll catch you next time.